Minister, thank you very much for the evidence you've been giving us. Can I ask you two questions? One is about the individuals involved, those who are sent to Rwanda. If there are still outstanding questions about the legitimacy of them having been sent there, and if we get into this quagmire that you've been describing of legal battles that can continue sometimes for years, what rights will they have once they've been sent to Rwanda? What will we do to ensure that their individual cases can then continue to be assessed? And my other question is about 114 million people displaced in the world. We're looking at countries like Sudan at the moment, where there are now some 11 million displaced by the war over the course of the last year. You said that there's been some movement in Europe towards the government's position. I want to know what the government is doing to ensure that there are real international efforts to get at the root causes of mass migration, because otherwise this legislation, as the Chair has indicated, it will look like a drop in the ocean in comparison with the scale of the problem.
My Lord, thank you very much indeed for your Lordship's question. It's a very important one. It is important to look at this in the round. It isn't just Rwanda. We are also returning people to their home country as well. But as you know, the challenge is where it's not possible, in those circumstances where it isn't possible to return people to their country of origin, to their home country. That's where the Rwanda scheme is particularly important. May I say so, your observation of the 114 million people who are on the move is a very astute one and a very important one. It was part of the West Balkans conference yesterday. That was the theme of it, because we know the Western Balkans is one of the routes where hundreds of thousands of people pass through, and that's why it's so important to tackle it. But respectfully, encouraging or having anything that will encourage that mass movement of people across borders is one that should be discouraged. My view, my personal view, and I think some may share this, is that it would be strongly preferable for people to claim asylum in the first safe country that they reach, rather than risking their lives on dangerous crossings. May I just say this very briefly, because we talked about humanity. People have been dying in the English Channel every single month. This is why I am personally determined that we must ensure that this policy works.
Sorry to interrupt, David. I'm a bit perturbed by this idea that people should seek asylum in the first safe country, because if you look at the stats, according to UNHCR, 70% of asylum seekers are already hosted in neighbouring countries to their countries of origin, and there's only 30% who are on the move in the way that you describe. And of 30% that are on the move, the United Kingdom isn't even in the top 15 countries in Europe for asylum seekers per head of the population. So what I don't really understand is, why do you think other countries in Europe, 15 of them, are able to cope with a higher volume of asylum seekers than the United Kingdom without resorting to legislation that potentially breaches international human rights law, or without resorting to sending them to Rwanda?
Well, Madam Chairman, respectfully, even if the figure is a third, and I accept what you say, but it is still the total, as Lord Alton quite rightly said, a total of over 110 million, 114 million, I think was the figure given. That's still 36 million people who are on the move, and respectfully, it is appropriate to claim asylum in the first safe country. No one who is in France is in an unsafe country. That is why they should not be putting their lives at risk, giving their money to these people traffickers, spending thousands of pounds on people who don't care if you live or die. I think some of the members of this committee have seen the boats, the condition of the boats.
Nobody is making any excuses for that.
Exactly.
My question specifically was, why do you think 15 other countries in Europe, some of them a great deal less wealthy than the United Kingdom, are able to cope with more asylum seekers than us without resorting to passing legislation which potentially breaches human rights law, or without sending them to Rwanda? What is it about the United Kingdom that we have to take such extreme measures when other European countries are not doing that?
Well, Madam Chairman, respectfully, part of your question is contested, because we had that exchange as to whether it does or does not breach international law. We had that exchange at the outset, so that's an assertion but not a conclusion. I believe that we are a generous and open and welcoming country. Look at the facts, look at the evidence. Over 500,000 people since between 2015 and 2023 have been rightly welcomed into this country under different schemes. But dare I say it, in terms of being a welcoming country, part of that is ensuring that we are welcoming people here under schemes that we have seen that are up and running, rather than coming across here illegally, taking routes that are dangerous for them and unacceptable for us. That is why we are determined to clamp down on these criminal smuggling gangs. We are a welcoming country, Madam Chairman, and that figure of over 500,000, in my view, speaks volumes.
There are many other countries that are more welcoming than us. But anyway, David, did you want to...
My real question was actually about international cooperation.
Yes, thank you.
Because really what I was driving at, Minister, is that if we treat people as though they're part of a sort of pass the parcel, somebody else's problem, this is going to go on, and whether they should be welcomed in one country or another isn't really my point. It's what are we going to do to tackle the root causes of this mass displacement? Why aren't we driving things on, for instance, as we do with climate change, with the international COP conferences and so on? Is the government giving thought to how we bring together countries to say this isn't just your problem or our problem, this is the world's problem, we've got to tackle this in a much more coherent way, with the generosity, for instance, of something like the Marshall Aid Programme, the things that we did when vast numbers of Europeans were on the move when the ECHR came about in the aftermath of the Second World War. We did a lot of things, whether they were practical or legal, we put those into place. And I agree with you about the generosity of our welcome, for instance, to the Ukrainians, to the Hong Kongers. We are capable of good deeds as well, so I'm not making any partisan point here. I'm just wondering, what are we doing to tackle the root causes, because the bill itself is not going to solve that.
My Lord, no, I recognise entirely. I have made some political points, if you like, but I don't see any political points in your question, and it's a perfectly proper question. I mentioned to the committee that I was in Albania for the past 48 hours. That is part of the cooperation between our two countries. Let's not just take the Albania scheme. Let's widen it out to the Western Balkans. Actually, that is part of the cooperation that can happen, and the investment that can happen, not just in the channel, if you like, but further upstream in order to prevent exactly the scenario that you're talking about. International cooperation is absolutely crucial. The Home Secretary himself made a speech in New York last month, it could even have been 6 weeks ago now, talking about the global cooperation, that's starting a global conversation with our international partners. That is absolutely right. This is the issue of our day. This is the issue of our time. 100 million people, whether they're just moving just across the border to the first safe country or moving further afield. We need to make sure we have grown-up conversations with our friends and allies. And in fact, in all of my meetings with my international counterparts, that's exactly what we're having. And dare I say it, by introducing the Rwanda bill, we have helped to start that conversation or reinvigorate that conversation and that debate with our international partners, and I think we'll see further movement as well.
And so with the Irish government, for instance, was referred to earlier on by the Chair, I mean, what conversations are we having with them to resolve this? So again, we don't get into this invidious position of saying, well, it's now your problem rather than ours.
Well, respectfully, that is a very good point. The common travel area, of course, is unique in relation to Ireland and Northern Ireland, but we should be having conversations, whether it's with France, whether it's with Ireland, or whether it's with the Balkan countries, whether it's with Italy and Greece. I was in Tunisia, in Libya as well, seeing those launching, trying to get across to Italy from Tripoli, and incredibly important that we work with organisations such as the IOM in order to support them to encourage more people to stay in the region rather than risk these treacherous journeys. I do agree. This is part of an important conversation that we must continue to have.
Thank you.
Thank you.